There is a redemption code available right now, and you can find it in the description below, so make sure to grab that before it expires because you definitely do not want to miss out on free rewards. And with that out of the way, something has been happening in the community. Because what started as a small, almost irrelevant balance change has somehow turned into a full-blown discussion about exploration, power creep, and even the direction of the game itself. And it all revolves around one question: why did they nerf this? At first glance, this situation seems almost too small to matter, because we are not talking about damage numbers or endgame viability or anything that would normally shake the meta. Instead, we are talking about mining rocks. Specifically a character named Linnea, and more importantly, what her kit used to do. Because originally, Linnea had a passive that was honestly kind of perfect for exploration, since she could break ores, collect them automatically, and even do it from range, which meant that you could walk into an ore cluster, press a button, and everything would just disappear into your inventory. And that detail right there is important, because it was not just about breaking rocks faster, it was about removing friction from something players do constantly. So naturally, people liked it. But then, the nerf happened. And suddenly, that same ability now takes multiple hits on stronger ores, making it feel far closer to what a standard Claymore character already does. And that is where the confusion begins, because if it now performs similarly to basic tools that already exist, then what exactly is the point of it anymore? And that question kept coming up again and again, with players saying things like, what's the point of this ability now? Or even more bluntly, might as well remove it entirely. Now here is where things start to get interesting, because the community did not just stop at complaining about Linnea. Instead, they started comparing her to other characters, and that is when an unexpected name kept showing up. Zhongli. And suddenly, what looked like a random nerf started to feel like something else entirely. Because Zhongli has had one very specific reputation for years, not just as a shielder, but as one of the most convenient mining characters in the game, thanks to his ability to break multiple ores at once with a single hold skill. But here is the thing, even that role has already been challenged. Players quickly pointed out that characters like Razor can achieve similar results with more flexibility, since he combines a wide area skill with Claymore attacks, meaning he can continue mining even while his ability is on cooldown. And it does not stop there, because newer characters like Navia or Mavuika are already extremely efficient at clearing ores just through their normal gameplay mechanics. So when you look at the bigger picture, Linnea was not actually breaking anything. She was just offering a smoother, more convenient version of something players already do. And that is exactly why the nerf feels so strange. Because if this was not about balance, then what was it about? This is where the discussion starts to shift away from mining itself and into something much bigger, the value of exploration. One of the most repeated ideas in the discussion is that exploration is not some side activity. It is the majority of the game for a lot of players, since endgame content might take less than an hour per month, while exploration is something you engage with constantly. And that changes how people evaluate characters. Because suddenly, a passive that saves time, reduces effort, and feels good to use can be just as valuable, or even more valuable, than a small increase in damage. Which leads to a really important realization. Some players were planning to pull Linnea specifically because of this passive. Not for meta. Not for combat. Just for how she felt to use in the open world. And when that passive got nerfed, those same players immediately started saying things like, "That was the only reason I wanted her," or even, "My motivation to pull her is gone." Now think about that for a second, because it reveals something very important about player behavior. People do not just pull for power. They pull for convenience, for comfort, for fun. And when those things get reduced, even slightly, it can have a surprisingly large impact. But this is also where another layer of the discussion starts to emerge, because this is not the first time players have felt something like this. In fact, many people started connecting the situation to a much larger pattern, exploration power creep. And to understand that, we need to look at characters like Wanderer and Chaska. Because when Wanderer released, his ability to fly felt incredible, almost game-changing, since it allowed players to bypass terrain in a way that was never really possible before. But then, much later, Chaska came along, and suddenly that same ability started to feel outdated. Not because Wanderer stopped working, but because Chaska simply felt smoother, faster, and more efficient. And that distinction matters because the environment did not change, but the feeling did. which creates this weird situation where older characters are still technically viable, but emotionally, they feel worse to use. And that is where the community starts to split. On one side, you have players saying that this kind of progression is completely normal, since newer characters should feel better, and older ones still work just fine. But on the other side, you have players who feel that this kind of design slowly erodes the value of their existing roster, especially when there are no updates or improvements to older characters. And when you bring Linnea back into this conversation, something interesting happens. Because instead of being another step forward in exploration quality, her NERF feels like a step backward. Like the game is not just moving on, but actively holding back certain improvements, which brings us back to the original question. Why? Some players believe that this might be about preserving the relevance of older characters, especially someone like Zhongli, who has already lost ground in other areas like shielding and team utility. There is even a bit of humor in the community about this, with jokes like, Zhongli has one job and he refuses to lose it, which, while funny, also reflects a real concern. Because if newer characters are not allowed to surpass older ones in certain areas, then what is the incentive for innovation? At the same time, others argue that this is part of a broader shift in design philosophy, especially after regions like Natlin, where exploration abilities became extremely powerful and in some cases, almost required to fully enjoy the environment. Some players describe this as a pay-for-convenience direction, where the best exploration tools are locked behind specific characters, rather than being universal upgrades. And that leads to a very delicate balance. Because on one hand, strong exploration abilities make the game more fun, but on the other hand, they can create pressure to pull for specific characters. And maybe, just maybe, this nerf is an attempt to control that balance. But if that is the case, then it comes with a cost. Because what players are reacting to is not just the loss of efficiency, but the loss of identity. Linnea's passive was not just useful, it was unique. It gave her a role outside of combat, something that made her feel different from other characters. And now, that uniqueness feels diminished, which brings us to a kind of ironic conclusion. This entire situation is not really about mining. It is about how small details can shape the overall experience of the game. It is about how convenience can influence pulling decisions. It is about how players perceive value, not just in numbers, but in how a character feels to use. And most importantly, it is about the ongoing tension between progression and preservation, between making new things better and keeping old things relevant. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think this nerf was justified, or do you think it removed something that made the game more fun? And more importantly, would something like this actually affect whether or not you pull for a character? If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe for more discussions like this, and I will see you in the next one.